Hey, good afternoon, y'all. This is Carolina Weather Authority meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg. I hope you're enjoying the nice weather we're having here in the southeast. It's going to change as we head into next week for sure. And the reason why is that whatever is left of Eta, which made landfall in Nicaragua and has now moved into western Honduras, is going to get pulled northward. And the question mark is going to be, where does it land? How quickly does it move? How much rain do we see? And how strong can it get? And I'm going to answer your questions with more questions. No, I'm just kidding. We'll have some answers. They may not be right, but we'll definitely do our best here because if anybody has watched the tropics for a number of years, there's a lot of players on the field, and we've got some uncertainty as time goes on. But what I will say is, if you are in Florida, you've probably already heard about this storm and know that you've been kind of lucky so far as to avoiding any major storm impacts. That could change in the Florida Keys and South Florida as we head into the weekend and next week. If you're in Cuba and the Bahamas, you may want to start looking at preparing for a potential hit here in the next couple of days. And if you're on the northern Gulf Coast, you just want to take hurricane season and throw it away. But what I will say is you still need to be watching anywhere from Louisiana eastward. I think we're fine in Texas or western Mexico, but the Yucatan, Louisiana on eastward, even up into the Carolinas, where we know that moisture is going to have to end up going at some point because it's done it 55 dozen times already this year, then we definitely need to be watching. All right, so I'm going to get into all that. If you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, that way you're not going to miss later videos that are going to come out as we at least get a little more certainty as to what's going to happen. So Eta has definitely been the strongest storm of the season. It's not looking anything like it did 2 days ago, but it's done a ton of damage in Central America. What we're looking at now is almost a remnant low. It's kind of a tropical depression embedded in a bigger circulation. And what that means is there's a lot of players on the field we've got to keep an eye on. So forecast models do their best in figuring what's going to happen, and they all are now agreeing that this system is going to have a chance at gradually reorganizing and re-strengthening over the weekend as it moves northeastward into the Northwest Caribbean. And then after that, we have to see where exactly it's going to go, how fast it moves, and how much land it will spend some time over. And oh, by the way, the farther west or northwest this system potentially goes, the more wind shear and dry air are going to increase. So that is going to potentially counter any strengthening trends that we have. So I've done my best in taking a stab at maybe 4 or 5 potential tracks that I've seen on the models. And the areas circled in yellow are areas that I think need to be at least watching for potential impacts. And areas in red have the best chance at seeing a named hurricane coming through. And that includes much of South Florida and also parts of the Panhandle near Panama City and the Yucatan and northwestern Cuba. Areas not in there are going to be less likely to see a hurricane due to what will be wind shear and a slower amount of motion. So here is a very, I guess, complex situation for you guys, but I hope these 4 bullet points kind of helps certainly put things in perspective for you, and that we will see a re-strengthening storm. How much is still up for grabs? Maybe a hurricane towards South Florida, the Northwest Bahamas, the Florida Keys, or even northern Cuba early next week. And then if you give me a couple more days, I'll give you a little more certainty in where the storm will go, because right now we don't know yet, because it's still spending time over land and weakening, but it will come out as a much weaker kind of a skeleton of what we had Eta that hit a few days ago, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's what we got right here, but anywhere from the central and southern Gulf on east needs to keep an eye on this system. All right, so here is the Hurricane Center forecast, and it has a system in northwestern Honduras moving northward and set to reemerge overnight tonight into areas west of Roatan and east of Belize, tucked into that corner of, I think it's the Gulf of Honduras, near the Guatemala-Honduras border and southeastern Belize. After that, it should turn northeast and approach Cuba. I do think on this track, sometime maybe tonight or tomorrow morning, the southern coast of Cuba will be put under a tropical storm watch, maybe even a hurricane watch, depending on how fast this thing organizes. And in the Caymans, you need to keep an eye on it. And then later on, we could see those extend into the western Bahamas and or the Florida Keys at South Florida sometime over the weekend, or maybe as soon as Friday night. So the satellite view, I'll get back to this in a minute, but the visible satellite view shows very disorganized area of showers and storms. In fact, the central core does not have a lot of rain with it anymore, which is a good sign because we've just had so much of it. But kind of a maximum here off of the coast of El Salvador on the Pacific side, and another maximum forming north of Honduras, embedded in a larger gyre, which I'm going to show you here on the infrared. This gyre takes up almost half of the Caribbean and the southwestern Atlantic, as well as the eastern Pacific. So what we're looking for is a core to form in here that will allow Eta to redevelop. It's not going to look like it did a few days ago. It will probably, because it's been through the battle here in the last couple of days of land, take some time to reorganize. But once it does, then the model should start to have a better grasp on where it's going to go and how strong it'll get. I am going to say that hurricane certainly is still looking possible, even though it is November. And this is just very rare this late in the season, but 2020 has been kind of a rare year. With the La Nina and the warmer waters and the lower wind shear, anything could still happen. I don't think we'll have a Category 4 or 5 hurricane at this point, but 1 or 2 certainly looks possible, as I'm going to show you on some of the ensembles. By the way, the next wave out here we've been tracking, it's not in a favorable spot due to the wind shear to form into anything for a while. But if we give it maybe 9 or 10 days, once Eta gets out of the way, I would not be shocked if we saw Theta. And then after that, Omicron, I think, is the next one on the list. I don't know. I've lost track at this point. All right. So from tropical tidbits and from weather models, I'll show you some model guidance and better agreement here in the next 2 or 3 days that the system will move northeastward toward Cuba and the Cayman Islands. After that, we've got a likely turn to the north and then northwest, maybe even to the west and southwest, depending on how strong the high-pressure ridge builds into the eastern U.S. One thing is for sure, it's not going to probably shoot quickly up the east coast at this point. We'll have to wait for a stronger trough to come in and break up the ridge, and that does not look likely in the next 10 days. After that, it could happen, but we're still dealing with kind of a summer-like pattern here for a few more weeks in the eastern United States. That could change, though, before Thanksgiving. You can see the ensembles from the GFS show a lot of uncertainty, but all of them put Florida in the window and Cuba as well. A few put Louisiana in the window in about 9 or 10 days, but not as many as, say, what we saw with Zeta last week. So I guess that's some better news. This will more likely be a central and eastern Gulf threat than a western Gulf threat at this point, at least we think. The intensity forecast does show steady intensification back to tropical storm strength, probably in about 36 hours, which puts us at early Friday morning. Saturday morning. Late Friday night, early Saturday morning. And then maybe as strong as a Category 1 hurricane by Sunday, or a stronger tropical storm, but then we've got land to deal with. So after that, there could be another chance for it to develop in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and then a couple of the ships models show a hurricane again in a week. That would be next Thursday, the 12th of November. And at that point, if you're in Florida, you've already gotten the rain and the wind that you're going to get. Question mark is, does it try to double back and hit you again from the west? And certainly that's possible. Wind shear right now is not too bad here in Central America, but as the system moves northeast, it will encounter more hostile wind shear out of the west as a trough drops through Florida and moves away, and then a stronger trough comes down through Texas and Louisiana. So it's not going to develop quickly, as it's kind of been a skeleton of what it was a couple of days ago when it was an area of very low wind shear. This high pressure region aloft is keeping the wind shear low, but now Eta is moving away from it into more hostile territory. It will still have a chance of developing. It's just not going to look like a pretty storm that's rapidly intensifying because of this wind shear. You'll also notice that the western and northern Gulf is featuring a lot of dry air. So some of that could get entrained into the system once it gets north of Cuba and is no longer in a protective environment of lots of moisture, if that makes any sense. Basically, a storm needs moisture to feed off of, and when it reaches areas of wind shear, and dry air getting entrained into it, it has a harder time of keeping thunderstorms organized near the center and could weaken or just take a while to develop. So those are the bullet points I'm making. Again, you can see this trough here in Florida, which is going to start to tug the storm northward, and then a stronger trough moving into Texas and Louisiana will turn it towards Cuba and Florida. After that, we've got a big ridge in the western United States extending down into western Mexico. That builds northeastward and produces a warm spell for the eastern and central U.S., but also keeps the system in a weaker steering environment because you need a trough to push it up between ridges, and this trough lifts out, so you no longer have that northward tug. And what we get is an area of uncertainty as to where the storm goes. All right, so here are the European ensembles going out 15 days from the 0-0 run. That was late last night, showing a couple of possibilities of tropical storm or even hurricane here, but a lot of uncertainty as to where a turn might go, and still some take it into Florida and then kind of kill it off. The run that was run after that shows more of an agreement that the storm makes a westward turn into the Gulf. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty over here. This would put us at the 10th and 11th of November. So next Tuesday into Wednesday, which is Veterans Day in the United States. Thank you all for serving, by the way. The HWRF shows it kind of goes in line with that. It spends more time over South Florida. It actually has a landfall over the Everglades, and then brings the storm through western Florida and back out near Tampa, where a lot of rain is possible for the first half of next week. The GFS parallel takes the storm all the way to the central Bahamas and then turns it back with a landfall near Homestead, Florida, and then a storm that's kind of shuffling around the eastern Gulf for a couple of days, maybe making landfall as a tropical storm or hurricane. Looks like near Sarasota or Cape Coral here in Florida. And then that moisture gets drawn northward. Oh, by the way, here's that wave, by the way, trying to develop into theta. And it may get going by the time it gets to the Yucatan or in the Northwest Caribbean, but that's more than a week off. So we don't know yet where that'll go. Something we'll have to keep an eye on in the Gulf of Mexico. The operational GFS shows a weaker system coming up near Destin, Florida, and then tracking moisture all the way up into the western Carolinas, Virginia, which could produce some flash flooding. And then it's got development coming around the 15th. Once Eta is out of the way, this would be theta. This system we'll have to keep an eye on as well, as it could send moisture into Florida. But this is a little more concerning, but again, way uncertain in maybe another major hurricane in the Northwest Caribbean here in about 14 days or so. The European model is backing off on intensity. It does take the system into the Gulf, but is not developing it into a full tropical system. Keeps it kind of as a hybrid system. But there is some development possible by the middle of next week if it gets far enough south in here where it's over the warm water. It will weaken, though, by the time it spreads northwest and gets sheared apart by wind shear. So that's better news for Louisiana. The Icon does not bring that storm quite as far south, but it does make the turn north by the middle of next week, approaching the Panhandle as a weaker system towards the end of next week. The other thing we'll talk about real quick is rainfall, and over the next 2 weeks, we've got a ton of it coming to the Bahamas and South Florida. The GFS showing as much as 10 inches in southeastern Florida across Miami-Dade County, with higher amounts coming up the East Coast, all the way into the Carolinas and southeastern Virginia, and then kind of a second maximum of wind and rain coming up through the Florida Panhandle into Georgia and into the southern Appalachians, where flash flooding will be possible, assuming that the storm comes up in this direction, which again is a dangerous assumption to make at this point. All right, so I'll show you the map one more time, but we are looking at the storm likely at its weakest now and ready to intensify slowly over the weekend, and perhaps getting to hurricane intensity near Cuba or South Florida by the start of next week. A possibility of a turn back to the west or even southwest, where we'll have to watch in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but a lot of uncertainty at this point. We're just going to have to see what the system looks like in a couple of days before the models have a better grasp on how strong it can get, how fast it'll move, and where it will go. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed today's weather and have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. God bless.